Sometimes I think back to how it all started. To those 2 years Maya and I spent meticulously saving for our dream trip to Italy. It wasn't just a vacation, it was something more. A quiet rebellion, perhaps, against a lifetime of putting others first. A promise to ourselves that this time, we would matter. Maya, my wife of 7 years, is truly one of a kind. If you're picturing a serene goddess who floats through life, well, you're not far off. She's the kind of person who remembers your obscure allergy and makes sure there's a safe dish at dinner, who sends handwritten thank you notes, and once, she drove an hour in a thunderstorm just to bring homemade soup to a coworker she'd known for 2 weeks. She's a better human than I deserve, and I genuinely mean that. She sees the best in people, sometimes even when they don't deserve it, and she saw through my family's nonsense long before I ever did. And my family, that's where things get a little tangled. I grew up in a house where the sun seemed to rise and set on my older sister, Chloe. I love Chloe, truly. She's my sister. But from the moment I could understand anything, it was clear who the star of the show was. Chloe was the first grandchild, the first to graduate college, the first to marry, the first to have kids. Every milestone she hit was celebrated like a national holiday. When I graduated with honors from my engineering program, I remember my dad, Arthur, saying, and I quote, "That's great, but hey, did your mom tell you Chloe's thinking about remodeling her kitchen?" I just sat there in my cap and gown, feeling like a background extra in someone else's epic. Chloe married Finn when she was 25. Finn has an endless supply of great business ideas that never quite pan out. He's been a day trader, a crypto consultant, a life coach, and most recently, he started some artisanal beef jerky company that lasted about 4 months before the health department got involved. Through it all, Chloe stayed home with their 3 kids, Liam, Nora, and little Owen, who everyone calls Ozzy for reasons I've forgotten. They're good kids, if a little chaotic and capable of turning a perfectly tidy living room into a disaster zone in under 6 minutes. The real issue was my parents, Arthur and Eleanor. For the last decade, they've acted like Chloe's chaos was everyone else's responsibility. When Finn's jerky empire collapsed, guess who loaned them rent money? Leo. When Chloe needed emergency dental work and their insurance lapsed because Finn forgot to pay the premium, guess who covered it? Leo. When they needed someone to watch the kids every other weekend so Chloe could decompress, guess who rearranged his entire schedule? You get the picture. And through it all, did anyone ever say thank you? Did anyone ever acknowledge that Maya and I had our own lives, our own plans, our own stuff going on? Not really. In my family, helping Chloe wasn't a favor, it was an expectation. It was the baseline. You didn't get credit for it any more than you'd get credit for breathing. About 2.5 years ago, Maya and I were just lying in bed, the soft glow of the nightlight in our room. She turned to me, her eyes sparkling, and said, "I want to go to Italy." She'd wanted to go since she was a little girl, ever since her grandmother showed her postcards from the Amalfi Coast and told her stories about whitewashed villages clinging to cliffs above water so blue it didn't look real. Her grandmother passed away before they ever got to go together, and that dream had been sitting in Maya's heart like an open tab ever since. So, we made a plan. We opened a separate savings account, set up automatic transfers, cut back on eating out, and for 2 years, we watched that number climb. $23,000. Flights, hotels, tours, spending money, all of it. We wanted to do it right. Our 7th anniversary was the target date, and we'd been counting down for months. Maya and I had never taken a real vacation together. Our honeymoon was a long weekend at a bed and breakfast 3 hours from home because I'd just started a new job. Every year since, something came up. Chloe needed help. My parents had a thing. Money got tight because I'd loaned some to my sister again. Every single year, our plans got bumped for someone else's emergency. Not this time. This time, we had the money saved, the flights booked, the hotels confirmed, and 2 weeks of paid time off approved. Maya had bought new sundresses and a travel journal. I'd downloaded 3 different apps to plan our itinerary. We were leaving on a Saturday morning, and by Saturday night, we'd be watching the sunset from a terrace in Rome. The Thursday before our flight, I made the mistake of mentioning the trip at my parents' house during a family dinner. I'd been vague about it on purpose, just saying we were going on a trip, but Eleanor pressed, and I told them, Italy. 2 weeks. Saturday morning flight. My mom's face did this thing where her smile stayed in place, but her eyes went completely flat, like someone had flipped a switch behind them. "Oh," she said, "that's a long trip." Arthur didn't even look up from his plate. Chloe asked how much it cost. When I didn't answer, she said, "Must be nice to have that kind of money just sitting around." Finn laughed. Maya squeezed my hand under the table. We left dinner early. Maya didn't say anything in the car for the first 10 minutes. Then she said, "They're going to try something. You know that, right?" I told her she was being paranoid. She gave me a look that said she loved me but also thought I was being incredibly naive. She's always right. I really should start leading with that. Friday night, the night before our 6 a.m. flight, our bags were packed, lined up by the front door. Maya had laid out our travel outfits. I triple-checked the passports. We were in bed by 9:30 because we had to be at the airport by 4 a.m. Everything was perfect. My phone rang at 10:15. It was Eleanor. I almost didn't answer. Something in my gut told me not to. But decades of conditioning are hard to override, so I picked up. "Leo, honey, I need you to listen to me," she said. Her voice had that specific tone she uses when she's about to frame a demand as a desperate plea. "Chloe needs you." She spun the story. Finn had apparently landed some kind of last-minute consulting gig 3 states away. He was leaving Saturday morning and wouldn't be back until the following Friday. Chloe had a commitment she couldn't get out of, something about a wellness retreat she'd already paid for that was non-refundable. So, the kids needed someone to watch them for the entire week. "Mom," I said, sitting up in bed. Maya was already awake, watching me with an expression that can only be described as "I told you so" in human form. "We're leaving for Italy in the morning. You know this." "I know, honey, but this is family. Chloe is really counting on you. She's been under so much stress lately." I took a breath, a long one. The kind of breath you take when you're choosing between saying what you want to say and saying what will keep the peace. For most of my life, I had chosen peace every single time. "Mom, I can't. We've been planning this for 2 years. The flights are booked. The hotels are paid for. I am not canceling." The silence on the other end lasted about 4 seconds. It felt like a full minute. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. That pleading tone was gone, replaced by something colder, something that sounded like disappointment sharpened into a weapon. "I just think it's interesting," she said, "that you can spend thousands of dollars on a vacation, but you can't help your sister when she needs you. Your father and I did not raise you to be selfish, Leo." I told her I was sorry she felt that way, but my answer was no. She hung up without saying goodbye. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. Just 5 words, "Family comes first, Leo." Maya read the text over my shoulder and said, "What do you want to do?" I loved her for asking it that way. Not telling me, not pressuring me, just giving me the space to decide. I thought about every cancelled plan, every borrowed dollar never repaid. Every moment I had put my own life on hold because someone decided their needs were more urgent than mine. And I thought about Maya, who had waited her whole life to see the Amalfi Coast, who had saved every spare dollar for 2 years. I turned off my phone, set my alarm for 3:30, and went to sleep. We boarded that plane at 6:02 a.m. on Saturday morning. When we landed in Rome 11 hours later and I turned my phone back on, it nearly vibrated off the tray table. 43 missed calls, 27 text messages, and 1 voicemail from my mother that started with the words, "I hope you are happy." Yeah, I was about to be. The first voicemail was from Eleanor, left around 6:45 a.m., right around the time our plane was pulling away from the gate. Leo, this is your mother. I don't know what you think you're doing, but Chloe is beside herself. Call me back immediately. Classic Eleanor. Not asking, telling. The second was from Chloe herself. Her voice had that particular wobble she does when she's trying to sound like she's been crying, but hasn't actually committed to real tears yet. Leo, I can't believe you just left. I really needed you this weekend. Finn is gone, and the kids are already being impossible. How could you do this to me? Note the framing. Not, how could you prioritize your wife and your anniversary and the trip you've been saving for? No, how could you do this to me? Because in Chloe's world, every decision anyone makes is either for her or against her. The third was from my dad. Shorter. Your mother is very upset. Your sister is very upset. I don't know what has gotten into you, but this is not how we raised you. Call us. No mention of my trip. No acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, I had a valid reason for not being available. I turned my phone off again after that third voicemail and didn't turn it back on for 2 days. And those 2 days in Rome were incredible. We walked through Trastevere with no plan and no schedule, just wandering through narrow streets lined with bougainvillea and stopping at whatever caught our eye. We ate at a tiny restaurant where the owner seated us on his rooftop and brought out dish after dish we didn't order, just waving his hand and saying, "You try, you try." Maya tried octopus for the first time and made a face I will treasure for the rest of my life. We stood at the Colosseum at golden hour, and she grabbed my arm and didn't say anything for a full 5 minutes. Just stood there looking out over the city with tears running down her face. Not sad tears. The kind you get when something you've imagined your whole life turns out to be even better than you pictured. That's when I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had made the right choice. On Monday morning, I finally turned my phone back on and started reading the texts. The first few were variations of the voicemails, disappointment, guilt trips, demands to call back. But then they started escalating. Eleanor had texted at least a dozen times. The progression went from "call me" to "this is unacceptable" to "I have never been so disappointed in you" to the one that really got me, "your grandmother would be ashamed of you." My grandmother, who had been gone for 6 years, was being weaponized from beyond the grave. That was a new level of guilt tripping, even for my mother. Chloe's texts were more dramatic. She sent me a picture of Ozzy crying with the caption, "This is what you are missing." She sent another one that said, "Finn's mom cannot help either, so I guess I just have to cancel everything because nobody cares about me." Then she sent a long paragraph about how I had always been jealous of her, and this was my way of punishing her for being the favorite. My dad sent exactly one more text. It said, "Do not bother coming to Thanksgiving." That was in early October. The man was preemptively disinviting me from a holiday that was 7 weeks away. But here's the thing that really twisted the knife. While I was scrolling through the messages, I noticed something. Not a single person had asked where we were. Not one text said, "Are you guys okay?" or "Did you make it safely?" or "How was the trip?" It was all about what I wasn't doing for them. Nobody cared where I was. They only cared where I was not. I showed Maya the texts over breakfast at our hotel. She read through them slowly, sipping her coffee. When she finished, she set the phone down and said, "Leo, I want to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. They don't miss you. They miss what you do for them. There's a difference, and it's the difference that matters." I sat with that for a long time. Through the ferry to Capri, through the waterfront in Marina Grande, through watching pelicans waddle around like they own the place. Asterisk, they don't miss you. They miss what you do for them. Asterisk, on our 4th night in Italy, Maya and I were sitting on a balcony on the Amalfi Coast, the one she had been dreaming about since she was 7 years old. The sun was going down, and the whole sky looked like it was on fire. She leaned against me and said, "Thank you for choosing us." And something shifted inside me. Something that had been bending for years finally broke. But it broke in a good way. I decided right there, watching the sun disappear into the Tyrrhenian Sea, that things were going to change. I was done being the family ATM. I was done being the emergency babysitter, the emotional support brother, the guy who drops everything because someone else didn't plan their life properly. I wasn't going to be cruel about it. I wasn't going to burn bridges or send some dramatic manifesto. I was just going to stop volunteering to carry weight that was never mine to carry. We spent the rest of the trip exactly the way we planned. Maya filled her travel journal cover to cover. I ate more lamb than any one person should consume in a 2-week span. We laughed more than we had in years. We held hands like we were 22 again. For 14 days, nobody asked me for money. Nobody needed me to fix their problems. And nobody made me feel guilty for existing on my own terms. When we got home, I sent one text to my family group chat. It said, "We are home safe. Trip was wonderful. Hope everyone is doing well." Short, polite, neutral. Eleanor responded 3 hours later with, "Glad you had fun." Chloe had to cancel her retreat. "She is very upset. No, welcome home. No, glad you are safe." Just one more reminder that my happiness had cost Chloe something. I didn't respond. And honestly, that silence felt like the most powerful thing I had done in 34 years. The first month after we got back from Italy was like living in a Cold War. Nobody called me. I didn't call them. For the first time since I could remember, my phone wasn't buzzing with requests from my family. And the silence was equal parts peaceful and unsettling. Like when you live next to train tracks your whole life, and then one day the train stops running. You should be relieved, but your brain keeps waiting for the rumble. Maya noticed the change in me right away. Not the family silence, she was thrilled about that. She noticed that I was lighter. I was sleeping better. I wasn't checking my phone every 20 minutes with that low-grade dread I used to carry around like a second wallet. She said it was like watching someone take off a backpack they had forgotten they were wearing. At work, things started shifting too. I had been a lead engineer at Whitmore and Associates for about 3 years, and I was good at my job, but I had always held back a little. Not on purpose, exactly. It's more that when you spend your whole life being told your accomplishments don't matter, you start believing it. You don't chase the big promotions. You don't speak up in meetings. You do solid work and hope someone notices. And when they don't, you tell yourself that's fine because at least you're being helpful. But after Italy, something clicked. My buddy at work, this guy named Garrett, took me aside one afternoon and said, "Leo, you've got more talent in your left pinky than half the guys in the executive boardroom. When are you going to stop acting like you're grateful to be here and start acting like they're lucky to have you?" I started putting together a proposal for a project I had been sitting on for over a year, a sustainable infrastructure design for a mixed-use development in the city. It was ambitious, way outside the scope of what our firm usually took on. Part of the reason I never brought it forward was because I could hear my dad's voice in the back of my head saying, "Don't get ahead of yourself." But I was done listening to that voice. I worked on the proposal for 3 weeks. Late nights, early mornings, weekends at the dining table with blueprints spread out while Maya brought me coffee and occasionally reminded me that humans need food. When I finally presented it to the partners at Whitmore, there was a silence in the room that lasted about 10 seconds. I thought I had crashed and burned. Then our senior partner, a woman named Vivian, who had been in architecture and engineering for 30 years, looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Why did you not bring this to us sooner?" They greenlit the project. Not only that, they put me in charge of it with my own team. It was the single biggest professional opportunity of my career. And it happened because for the first time in my life, I was not using all my energy propping up people who didn't appreciate it. Meanwhile, the family Cold War continued. My cousin Caleb kept me updated through texts that read like dispatches from behind enemy lines. According to Caleb, my parents were telling extended family that I had abandoned Chloe in her time of need to go on a lavish European vacation. The word lavish was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. They made it sound like I chartered a yacht while my sister sat alone in a dark room. The reality was that Chloe had ended up asking Finn's mother, a perfectly capable woman named Colleen, who lived 20 minutes away, to watch the kids. The very same Colleen who Chloe's earlier text had claimed couldn't help. Funny how solutions appear when the designated doormat isn't available. Caleb also told me something that stuck with me. He said that at a family dinner I wasn't invited to, Eleanor had said, Leo has always been difficult. Even as a child, he always wanted things to be about him. The kid who never had a birthday party that wasn't also Chloe's celebration. The kid who wore hand-me-downs while his sister got new clothes. The kid who was told to be quiet every time he tried to share good news about himself. That kid was the one who wanted things to be about him. Around November, I got a text from Chloe. The first direct communication in about 6 weeks. It said, Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner is December 8th. You should be there. Not an invitation, an instruction. The call came on December 3rd, 5 days before the dinner. It was from my dad, which immediately told me something was serious because Arthur doesn't call. Arthur texts 5-word sentences and considers that communication. Leo, he said. No, hey. No, son. Just Leo, flat and serious. We need to talk. He told me that Finn's latest business venture, some online supplement company, had not just failed. It had failed spectacularly. He had taken out a personal loan against the house he and Chloe were renting from my parents. That's right. My parents owned the house Chloe lived in. They bought it years ago as an investment property and rented it to Chloe and Finn at well below market rate, which I had never been told about. So, not only had my parents been subsidizing Chloe's lifestyle for years in ways I didn't even know about, but now Finn had managed to drag a property my parents owned into his financial disaster. The lender was threatening to put a lien on the property. My parents' credit was at risk. They needed $25,000 to settle the debt and prevent things from getting worse. We need your help, Leo. You're the only one in a position to handle this. What about Chloe? What about her? Has she contributed anything? Has Finn? Finn doesn't have anything to contribute. You know that. And Chloe is doing her best with the kids. Dad, I've been doing my best too, for years. And every time I did my best for this family, it wasn't enough, and it wasn't acknowledged. You texted me that I shouldn't bother coming to Thanksgiving because I took my wife on a trip we saved 2 years for. Another silence. Then, that was your mother's idea, and you sent it. I told my dad I needed time to think. He said, don't take too long, which was about as close to please as Arthur gets. That night I told Maya everything. She listened the way she always does. Full attention. No interrupting. Just absorbing. When I finished, she said, what do you want to do? And I mean you, Leo, not the version of you that feels obligated. The real you. I don't want to just hand them money. Not this time. Not after everything. Then don't. But it's my parents. If they lose that property, their retirement is affected. They will be in real trouble. Maya nodded. That's real. But here's the thing, if you bail them out with no conditions, nothing changes. You become the ATM again. Chloe and Finn face 0 consequences, and next year it will be something else. She was right. She's always right. Over the next 2 days, I did something I had never done before. I consulted a financial advisor, a guy named Silas that Garrett had recommended. Silas was a straight shooter with a handshake like a bear trap and a talent for making complicated things simple. I laid out the whole situation, family dynamics included, and asked him what he thought. Silas leaned back in his chair and said, Leo, you've got the means to help, and that is a good position to be in, but you've also got leverage, and that is a better position. If you're going to put $25,000 on the table, you need to make sure it's a transaction, not a donation. Set terms, protect yourself, and make sure everyone in that family understands that the Bank of Leo is closing permanently after this. So, that's what I did. I spent the next 2 days putting together what Maya jokingly called the Leo Accords. It was a formal agreement, drafted with the help of a lawyer friend of Silas's named Brooke, that outlined exactly what would happen if I agreed to help. The terms were simple. I would provide the $25,000 as a loan, not a gift. It would be repaid in full within 5 years at a modest interest rate. The repayment would be the responsibility of Chloe and Finn, since it was their mess, not my parents'. There would be a signed promissory note. My parents would formally transfer ownership of the rental property into their own names only, removing any possibility of Finn using it as collateral again. And Finn would be required to complete a financial literacy course before any funds were dispersed. I also added a personal clause that Brooke said was not legally binding, but that I wanted in writing anyway. It stated that this was the final financial assistance I would provide to any family member. Period. Full stop. The well was dry after this. I drove to my parents' house on December 8th with a folder on the passenger seat and a calm in my chest that I hadn't expected. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just ready. For 34 years, I had walked into that house trying to be small enough to fit the space they had made for me. Tonight, I was walking in at full height. The house smelled like Eleanor's pot roast. Chloe was already there, sitting at the dining room table with Finn, who was on his phone and looked like he would rather be anywhere else. My parents were in the kitchen. Eleanor turned around and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Leo, you came," like she was surprised I had shown up to a dinner I said I would attend, like I was the unreliable one. We sat down to eat, and for about 20 minutes, it was almost normal. My mom talked about her garden club. My dad mentioned something about the gutters needing work. Chloe complained about Liam's teacher. Nobody mentioned Italy. Nobody mentioned the 43 missed calls. Nobody mentioned the fact that we hadn't spoken properly in 2 months. We just pretended, the way my family has always pretended that if you don't talk about something, it didn't happen. I let it go on until dessert. Eleanor brought out a pie, and while she was cutting it, I set the folder on the table. "What is that?" Chloe asked, eyeing it like I had placed a live animal on the tablecloth. "That is what I came to talk about." I looked at my dad. "You called me about the money situation. I have given it a lot of thought, and I have come up with a solution." The room went quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the kitchen clock ticking. Eleanor set down the pie server. Arthur crossed his arms. Finn finally put down his phone. I opened the folder and laid out the agreement. I explained each term calmly and clearly, the way I present a project proposal at work. The loan, the repayment schedule, the promissory note, the property transfer, the financial literacy course for Finn, the clause about this being the last time. When I finished, nobody spoke for what felt like an eternity, but was probably about 15 seconds. Chloe broke the silence first. "You are joking, right? You want us to sign a contract? I'm your sister, Leo. Not a business deal." "You're right. You are my sister, and I love you. But I have given this family thousands of dollars over the years, and not once has anyone acknowledged it, thanked me for it, or paid me back. I am not doing that again. If I am going to help, there are going to be terms." "This is ridiculous," Chloe said, looking at my parents for backup. "Mom, tell him this is ridiculous." Eleanor's mouth opened, but my dad spoke first. "Let me see it." He pulled the document toward him and started reading. Eleanor leaned over his shoulder. The room was so quiet I could hear Finn breathing. After a minute, my dad looked up. "You want Chloe and Finn to repay you, not us." "That is correct. It is their debt. Finn took out the loan. It should be their responsibility. I cannot afford that, Finn said, speaking for the first time all night. I am between opportunities right now. You have been between opportunities for 7 years, Finn, I said it the way you state a fact. The sky is blue, water is wet, Finn is between opportunities. That's why there is a financial literacy course in the agreement, and that's why the repayment period is 5 years. I am not asking for the money tomorrow. I am asking for accountability. Chloe stood up. I cannot believe this. After everything Mom and Dad have done for you, this is how you treat family. You go on your fancy vacation, you disappear for months, and now you show up with a contract. And that's when something happened that I didn't expect. Eleanor spoke. Sit down, Chloe. We all looked at her. Chloe looked like she had been slapped. Eleanor's face was doing something I had never seen before. Something that looked almost like shame. Your brother, Eleanor said slowly, like she was choosing each word carefully, is the only person in this family who has consistently shown up. He is the only one who has ever offered to help without being asked. And we have never, not once, treated him the way he deserved for it. She looked at me, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother actually seeing me. I owe you an apology, Leo. A real one. Not for the phone call, for all of it. My dad cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, which for Arthur meant he was experiencing a human emotion and didn't know where to put it. Your mother is right. We leaned on you too hard. That was not fair. I will not pretend something didn't crack open in my chest when they said that. But I held it together because this was not the time for a breakdown. This was the time for a new beginning. And new beginnings require clear heads. Chloe sat back down. She was crying. Real tears this time. Not the performative kind. I didn't know, she said quietly. I mean, I knew you helped, but I didn't know it was like that. I didn't know you felt like that. Because nobody asked, I said. Not with anger, just truth. Finn, to his credit, looked at the agreement and said, I will sign it, and I will do the course. Then he looked at me and said something he had never said in all the years I had known him. Thank you, Leo, and I am sorry. They signed both copies. My dad signed as a witness. My mom watched the whole thing with her hand over her mouth, and when it was done, she walked over to me and hugged me. A real hug. The kind that lasts long enough for you to feel it in your bones. That was 4 months ago. Chloe and I have talked more in the last 4 months than we did in the previous 4 years. It's not perfect. We're not suddenly best friends. But she called me on my birthday last month. The first time she had remembered it without being reminded. And she said, I know I have a lot of making up to do. I'm going to try. That was enough for now. Finn is 3 weeks into his financial literacy course. And according to Chloe, he is actually engaged with it. He got a steady job at a distribution warehouse. Not glamorous, but steady, with benefits and a paycheck that shows up on time. My parents renegotiated the rental arrangement for the house, and Chloe and Finn are paying something closer to fair market value now, which Chloe initially protested and then accepted when she realized this was what adult life actually looks like. My parents and I are in a different place. Not worse, not entirely better, just different, more honest. Eleanor has started asking me about my work, actually asking and listening to the answers. My dad is not great with words, but he showed up at my office last week with a bag of bagels and said, saw this place on the way over. Thought you might be hungry. For Arthur, that is basically a sonnet. The project at work is ahead of schedule. Garrett took me out for a steak last week and said, I told you they were lucky to have you. Now everybody knows it. Vivian mentioned the word partner in a meeting last month. And while I don't want to jinx anything, let's just say I didn't hate the sound of it. And Maya, my wonderful, patient, brilliant Maya, who saw through my family's nonsense long before I did and loved me anyway. Last Tuesday, she came home from work and found me in the kitchen attempting to recreate a pasta dish we had in Rome. It was terrible. Like, genuinely bad. She ate the whole plate and told me it was the best meal she had ever had. And when I called her a liar, she laughed and said, "Okay, it's awful, but you made it for me, and that's what matters." We are already planning our next trip, Spain this time. And this time, when my phone rings the night before, I'm not going to hesitate. I'm going to smile, let it ring, and go to sleep next to the woman who taught me that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. So yeah, 43 missed calls, 27 texts, 1 voicemail that started with, "I hope you are happy." I am. I really am. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your family didn't miss you, but what you did for them?